The gunshot echoed through Montezuma, Colorado, as Rose Zachary dropped to her knees beside her dying husband, tears streaming down her face while the cruel spring wind of 1876 whipped around them. His blood seeped into the dusty Main Street as he gasped his final words, telling her to find happiness again before his eyes went vacant, leaving her a 24-year-old widow in a town that suddenly felt as vast and empty as the surrounding mountains. "No, no, no," Rose sobbed, cradling John's head in her lap, oblivious to the gathering crowd of townsfolk. Her auburn hair came loose from its careful arrangement, falling around her face like a curtain as she bent over him, as if she could somehow shield him from a death that had already claimed him. Sheriff Miller pushed through the crowd, his weathered face grim as he knelt beside them. "I'm sorry, Rose, he's gone." "Who did this?" Rose demanded, her voice breaking. "The Blackwell brothers," Sheriff Miller answered solemnly. "They were aiming for me. John just happened to be in the wrong place." Rose felt numb as the sheriff and Doc Peterson gently pulled her away so they could move John's body. 2 years of marriage ended in an instant because of a stray bullet meant for someone else. The unfairness of it crushed her chest, making it difficult to breathe. "Come on, dear Mrs." Peterson said softly, placing a comforting arm around Rose's shoulders. "Let's get you home." The days that followed passed in a haze of grief. Rose barely registered the funeral, the condolences, or the casseroles left by well-meaning neighbors. The small house she'd shared with John felt cavernous now, filled with memories that cut like knives. Each night she cried herself to sleep, clutching his pillow that still smelled faintly of him. After a month of mourning, practical concerns intruded on her grief. The general store John had owned needed attending, and bills needed paying. Rose had worked alongside her husband since their wedding day, but running the business alone seemed insurmountable. Nevertheless, she forced herself to reopen the store, moving mechanically through each day, barely speaking more than necessary to customers. 6 months after John's death, Sheriff Miller entered the store just before closing time. His expression was both solemn and satisfied. "We got them, Rose." "The Blackwell brothers, they won't hurt anyone else." Rose nodded, feeling hollow rather than relieved. "Thank you, Sheriff." "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," she replied, the lie practiced and smooth. The truth was that Rose was barely surviving. The store was failing, she couldn't keep up with inventory, and her distracted demeanor discouraged customers. Debt was mounting. Something would have to change. 2 weeks later, Rose made her decision. She couldn't stay in Montezuma, surrounded by memories and pitying glances. She would sell the store and move to Denver, where her cousin lived. Perhaps in a larger city she could find work and anonymity. The sale happened quickly. Mr. Olson from the neighboring town had been eyeing expansion, and he paid a fair price. Rose packed her belongings, sold what she couldn't take, and prepared for her departure. The night before she was to leave, a spring thunderstorm raged across the mountains. Rose sat by the window, watching lightning slash the sky when a pounding at her door startled her. Opening it, she found a tall stranger, soaked to the skin and leading a limping horse. "Madam, forgive the intrusion," the man said, removing his hat. "My horse threw a shoe and went lame. I saw your light and hoped I might shelter here until the storm passes." Rose hesitated. Taking in a stranger, especially a man, wasn't proper for a woman alone, but the storm was fierce and she was leaving tomorrow anyway. "Come in," she said finally. "There's a stable out back for your horse." "Much obliged," the man said, his voice deep and gentle. "Name's Kirby Powell." "I'll see to my horse and be right back." When Kirby returned, Rose had stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil. She got a better look at him in the light, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it was beginning to dry. His face was tanned and weathered from the sun, with striking blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He was older than her, perhaps 30, with a quiet confidence in his movements. "Thank you kindly for the hospitality, madam," he said, warming his hands by the fire. "Rose Zachary," she introduced herself, "and it's nothing. No one should be out in weather like this." "Traveling alone?" he asked, then quickly added, "Pardon my asking, just noticed the packed trunks." "I'm leaving for Denver tomorrow," Rose explained, pouring coffee into 2 cups. My cousin lives there, Kirby nodded thoughtfully. Denver's growing fast, plenty of opportunity there. That's my hope. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a while, listening to the rain pelt the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. What takes you through Montezuma, Mr. Powell? Rose asked eventually. We're not exactly on the main trail. Just Kirby, please. He took a sip of coffee. I'm heading to Silverton, bought a stake in a silver mine there. You're a miner, Kirby chuckled. No, madam, I'm a rancher by trade. But I've been lucky with some investments. The mine's just the newest venture. Rose studied him curiously. He didn't have the rough manner of most miners or the flashy style of successful businessmen. He wore simple, practical clothes, good quality but well worn. You don't look like a businessman, she observed. Started as a cowhand when I was 16, he explained. Worked my way up to foreman, then saved enough to buy my own spread in Wyoming. Cattle prices have been good the last few years. As the night wore on, Rose found herself talking more than she had in months. Kirby was an easy conversationalist, sharing stories of life on the range but never prying too deeply into her circumstances. His presence was oddly comforting. Morning came with clear skies. Kirby examined his horse's leg and frowned. He'll need a day or 2 before he can travel, he said, returning to where Rose was preparing breakfast. The livery stable can look after him, Rose suggested. Mr. Jensen is good with horses, and where might I find lodging in town? The Montezuma Hotel is just down the street. It's small but clean, Kirby nodded. Will you still be leaving today? Yes, the stagecoach comes through at noon. Then I won't keep you, he said, finishing his breakfast. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Zachary. It was nothing, Rose replied, suddenly feeling awkward. Kirby stood and put on his hat. Safe travels to Denver. I hope you find what you're looking for there. After he left, Rose continued her preparations, trying not to think about how the house had felt less empty with Kirby Powell's presence. It had been a brief, chance encounter, nothing more. When the stagecoach arrived, Rose was surprised to see Kirby among the small group of townspeople who came to see her off. Thought I'd wish you well properly, he said, helping load her trunks. Thank you, she replied, touched by the gesture. Before she boarded, he handed her a small envelope. My business address in Wyoming, should you ever need anything. Denver can be overwhelming for newcomers. Rose tucked the envelope into her reticule, oddly moved by this unexpected kindness from a stranger. The journey to Denver was long and uncomfortable, giving Rose too much time to think. She found herself wondering about the rancher with the kind eyes and easy smile. In another life, one where her heart wasn't shattered into pieces, perhaps she would have been intrigued by him. Denver was indeed overwhelming. The city bustled with activity, streets crowded with people from all walks of life. Rose's cousin Margaret welcomed her warmly, but her small apartment felt cramped after the open spaces of Montezuma. Rose quickly discovered that finding employment was more difficult than she'd anticipated. Without specific skills or references, the best she could secure was a position as a shop girl in a busy mercantile. The work was exhausting, the pay meager, and the customers often rude. As weeks passed, Rose grew increasingly dissatisfied. The anonymity she'd craved now felt like isolation. She missed the mountains, the clean air, even the familiar faces of Montezuma. One evening, after a particularly trying day, Rose found herself removing Kirby Powell's envelope from the drawer where she'd tucked it away. Inside was a simple card with an address in Laramie, Wyoming, and a brief note. If Denver doesn't suit, there's plenty of sky in Wyoming, KP. Rose traced her fingers over the firm handwriting. She'd barely known the man. Writing to him would be improper, foolish even. Yet something about his steady presence had left an impression. That night, she wrote a careful letter, simply explaining that Denver had not been what she'd hoped and asking if he knew of any opportunities in Wyoming that might suit a woman with experience running a small general store. 3 weeks later, a response arrived. Kirby wrote that, as it happened, the growing town near his ranch was in need of a capable person to run the mercantile as the elderly owner wished to retire. If Rose was interested, the position could be hers. He included train fare and directions. Rose read the letter multiple times. It seemed like providence. Yet she hesitated. Moving to an unfamiliar town where she knew only one person and barely knew him was risky, but staying in Denver, where she was slowly drowning in anonymity and drudgery, seemed worse. A week later, Rose found herself on a train bound for Wyoming, a mix of trepidation and anticipation fluttering in her stomach. Laramie was smaller than Denver but larger than Montezuma, with a frontier energy that seemed to pulse through its streets. When Rose disembarked, scanning the platform uncertainly, a familiar figure approached. Mrs. Zachary, Kirby greeted her, tipping his hat. "Welcome to Wyoming." In daylight, he looked different from her memory, taller, perhaps, his face more handsome than she recalled. His smile remained the same, though, warm and genuine. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Powell," she replied, suddenly shy. "Just Kirby, remember?" He took her bags. "I've arranged a room for you at the hotel until you decide if you want to stay." The town of Clearwater was 20 miles from Laramie, a journey they made in Kirby's wagon. Along the way, he pointed out landmarks and told her about the area. His ranch, the Triple P, lay 5 miles outside town. "It's a growing community," he explained. "Mostly ranch families and the businesses that support them. Good people, for the most part." Clearwater proved to be a pleasant surprise, neat, prosperous-looking, with a main street lined with established businesses. The Mercantile sat prominently in the center, a large, well-kept building with a second story that Kirby explained contained living quarters. "Mr. Thompson has run this store for 30 years, Kirby said as they entered. "He's ready to retire to live with his daughter in California." Howard Thompson was a spry, elderly man with twinkling eyes who greeted Rose warmly. "Kirby says you've experience with a general store, young lady. My late husband and I ran one in Colorado for 2 years, and I continued alone for 6 months after his passing," Rose explained. "Sorry to hear about your loss," Thompson said kindly. "Would you like to see how we operate here?" For the next hour, Thompson showed Rose around the store, explaining his inventory system, introducing his 2 part-time employees, and discussing the business's finances. It was larger and more prosperous than the store she'd run with John, but the principles were the same. "What do you think?" Kirby asked afterward as they sat at the town's small cafe. "It's a good business," Rose said thoughtfully, "but I'm not sure I can afford to buy it." "Thompson's willing to sell on terms," Kirby explained. "A down payment with the rest paid over time from profits. I'd be willing to help with the down payment as an investment." Rose looked at him sharply. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." Kirby met her gaze steadily. "I'm a good judge of character, Mrs. Zachary. You strike me as capable and honest. Besides, the town needs that store and Thompson deserves his retirement." Rose considered his words. The opportunity was better than she could have hoped for, yet accepting financial help from a man she hardly knew felt uncomfortable. "I would insist on a proper business arrangement," she said finally. "With interest on any loan and everything in writing," Kirby smiled. "I'd expect nothing less." Within a week, Rose had made her decision. The store was perfect, the town welcoming, and the opportunity too good to pass up. She signed the papers, making a modest down payment from her savings, with Kirby providing the remainder as a business loan at fair interest. The upstairs apartment was spacious and bright, with large windows overlooking the main street. As Rose unpacked her few belongings, she felt a glimmer of something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The transition to running Thompson's Mercantile, soon to be renamed Zachary's, went smoothly. Rose's experience served her well, and the elderly shopkeeper stayed on for 2 weeks to introduce her to the community and regular customers. Kirby visited occasionally, sometimes for supplies, sometimes just to check how she was settling in. His ranch kept him busy, especially as summer approached with its demanding schedule of cattle work. Still, he always found time to stop by when in town. Rose found herself looking forward to his visits. Kirby never stayed long, never imposed, but his steady presence and practical advice were reassuring as she navigated her new life. She told herself it was simply appreciation for his help, nothing more. Her heart was not ready for anything beyond friendship. Summer came to Wyoming with long, warm days and cool evenings. The store prospered under Rose's management. She added inventory that appealed to the ranch wives, expanded the selection of seeds and farming implements, and kept the books meticulously. Customers appreciated her fair prices and friendly service, and word spread to outlying homesteads. One evening in late June, Rose was closing up when Kirby arrived, looking trail-worn but pleased. "Just finished moving the herd to summer pasture," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by before heading home." "You look like you could use a meal," Rose observed, noting his tired eyes. "I wouldn't say no," he admitted with a smile. "Let me close up, and I'll fix something upstairs." Kirby hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose or cause talk. It's just a meal between friends," Rose said firmly, though she felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Besides, you've helped me enough that I owe you a home-cooked dinner at the very least." Upstairs, Rose prepared a simple meal of fried chicken, potatoes, and fresh greens from the kitchen garden she'd started behind the store. Kirby washed up at the pump outside, returning with his hair damp and his face clean-shaven. As they ate, Kirby told her about life on the ranch, the challenges of managing cowboys, the satisfactions of seeing healthy calves grow, the endless work of maintaining fences and water sources. "It sounds like you love it," Rose commented. "I do," he acknowledged, "though sometimes it gets lonely." "No family?" Rose asked, realizing she knew little about his personal life. A shadow crossed his face. "Had a wife once, Sarah. She died in childbirth 8 years ago along with our son." "I'm so sorry," Rose said softly, understanding his loss in a way few could. "Life goes on," he said simply. "The ranch keeps me busy enough not to dwell on it most days." They shared a moment of silent understanding, two people who had loved and lost. "And you?" Kirby asked gently. "If you don't mind my asking, your husband?" "John was shot," Rose said, the words still painful. "Wrong place, wrong time, just over a year ago now." "That's tough," Kirby said, his blue eyes sympathetic. "No warning, no chance to prepare." "Not that you can ever truly prepare to lose someone you love," Rose replied. They talked long into the evening, sharing stories of their lives before loss had changed them. Rose found herself laughing at Kirby's tales of cowboy mishaps, something she hadn't expected to do again so soon. As he prepared to leave, Kirby paused at the door. "The town's holding a 4th of July celebration next week. Picnic, dancing, fireworks, the works. Would you consider attending with me?" Rose felt a flutter of panic. A public outing together would signal something beyond friendship to the townsfolk. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that," she said honestly. Kirby nodded, understanding in his eyes. "No pressure, Rose, just thought you might enjoy the celebration." After he left, Rose sat by the window, watching his tall figure mount his horse and ride away. Kirby Powell was a good man, kind, honorable, and increasingly important to her, but the thought of opening her heart again terrified her. What if she lost him too? The 4th of July arrived with perfect weather. Rose opened the store for the morning, then closed at noon as the town began its celebrations in the large meadow at the edge of Clearwater. She watched from her window as families streamed past, carrying baskets and blankets. After an hour of indecision, Rose put on her best blue dress, arranged her hair carefully, and joined the festivities. The meadow was filled with tables of food, children playing games, and townspeople mingling. A small band had set up under a canopy, preparing for dancing later. "You came," Kirby's voice came from behind her. Rose turned to find him dressed in his Sunday best, clean-shaven and smiling. "I decided I shouldn't miss my first Clearwater celebration," she said. "I'm glad." He offered his arm. "May I show you around?" The day passed pleasantly. Kirby introduced Rose to ranchers and their families who lived too far out to visit town regularly. They shared a picnic lunch, applauded the children's races, and watched the pie-eating contest with amusement. As evening approached, lanterns were lit and the band began playing. Couples moved to the cleared area serving as a dance floor. "Would you care to dance?" Kirby asked hesitantly. Rose watched the dancing, feeling both drawn to it and afraid. "I haven't danced since before John died." "We don't have to," Kirby assured her. Rose looked up at him, at his patient expression and the warmth in his eyes. One dance, she decided. Kirby's hand was warm and steady on her waist as he guided her through a waltz. He was a surprisingly good dancer for a rancher, moving with natural grace. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Rose asked. "My mother insisted all her sons learn properly," he explained with a smile, "said we'd never find wives otherwise." "How many brothers do you have?" "3, all with ranches of their own now, 2 in Montana, 1 in Idaho." As they continued dancing, Rose gradually relaxed, enjoying the music and Kirby's company. When the song ended, she expected to step away, but he kept hold of her hand. "One more?" he asked hopefully. They ended up dancing most of the evening. As darkness fell, everyone gathered on the hillside to watch the fireworks display. Sitting on a blanket Kirby had brought, Rose felt a contentment she hadn't expected to find again. "Thank you for convincing me to come," she said softly. "Thank you for taking a chance," he replied, his eyes reflecting the colorful bursts overhead. In the weeks that followed, Kirby began courting Rose properly. He never pushed, never pressed for more than she was ready to give, but his intentions were clear. He brought flowers when he came to town, took her on Sunday drives in his buggy, and escorted her to church socials. Rose found herself looking forward to his visits with increasing anticipation. Kirby was different from John, more reserved, less impulsive, but his steady presence felt like a rock in the uncertain currents of her life. Still, whenever their relationship seemed about to deepen, she pulled back, fear gripping her heart. Late summer brought the county fair, a major event that drew people from miles around. Rose closed the store for 2 days to attend, accompanied by Kirby. They wandered through exhibitions of livestock and handicrafts, sampled fair food, and cheered at the horse races. On the second evening, as they walked back to town under a star-filled sky, Kirby stopped and turned to face her. "Rose, I need to say something," her heart quickened. "Yes, these past months getting to know you have been the happiest I've had in years," he said quietly. "I care for you deeply." Rose felt joy and terror simultaneously. "Kirby, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know you're still healing. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I care for you too," Rose admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of loving again," she said, finally voicing her deepest fear. "Of losing again." Kirby reached out slowly, taking her hands in his. "I understand that fear better than most, but at some point we have to decide if the possibility of love is worth the risk of loss." Tears filled Rose's eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive that again." "You're the strongest woman I've ever met, Rose Zachary," Kirby said with conviction, "but I won't rush you. Take all the time you need." His words, so simple yet so profound, touched something deep in Rose's heart. Here was a man who understood her pain, who was willing to wait until she was ready. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hands. Fall came to Wyoming with spectacular colors and crisp, clear days. The store grew busier as ranchers prepared for winter, stocking up on supplies. Rose hired an additional clerk, a young widow named Martha, to help with the increased workload. Kirby remained true to his word, never pressing Rose for more than she was willing to give. Their relationship continued, warm and caring but carefully restrained. He invited her to Sunday dinners at his ranch, introducing her to the rhythms and routines of ranch life. Rose found herself increasingly comfortable there, admiring the home Kirby had built, sturdy and practical, but with touches of beauty, like the garden he maintained in memory of his first wife. As November arrived with its shortened days and first snows, Rose realized something had shifted within her. The pain of John's loss remained, but it no longer consumed her. She could think of him now with fondness rather than agony, remembering the good times without being overwhelmed by his absence. And alongside that healing came the undeniable recognition that she had fallen in love with Kirby Powell. His quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, and his patient understanding had gradually but surely claimed her heart. On a cold, clear Sunday afternoon, Rose rode out to the Triple P Ranch. Kirby had invited her for dinner, but she arrived early, finding him in the barn checking on a mare about to foal. "You're early," he said with a pleased smile, wiping his hands on a rag. "I wanted to talk to you," Rose said, suddenly nervous. "Something wrong?" "No." She took a deep breath. "Something right, I hope." Kirby looked at her questioningly. "You told me to take all the time I needed," Rose said softly. I think I'm ready now." Understanding dawned in Kirby's eyes, but he remained still, waiting for her to continue. "I'll always love John," she said, her voice steady. "He was my first love, and part of my heart will always be his." "As it should be," Kirby agreed quietly. "But I've found that my heart has room for more love," Rose continued, stepping closer to him. "Room for you if you still want it." Kirby's face transformed with joy. "Are you sure?" Rose nodded. "I can't promise I won't still be scared sometimes, but I don't want fear to keep me from happiness anymore." Slowly, giving her time to change her mind, Kirby leaned down and kissed her. His lips were gentle, the kiss tender and full of promise. Rose found herself responding, her arms going around his neck as warmth spread through her. When they separated, Kirby rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Rose Zachary. Have since the moment you opened your door to a stranger in a thunderstorm." "I love you too," she whispered, the words both frightening and freeing. Winter in Wyoming was harsh but beautiful. Rose's store thrived as the community's gathering place during the cold months. She expanded the inventory to include more books and sewing supplies, creating a small sitting area where ranch wives could socialize while in town. Kirby visited as often as the weather allowed, sometimes staying in town for days when snow made travel to the ranch difficult. They spent Christmas together, joining the community celebration at the church and exchanging simple gifts. Afterward, a hand-knit scarf from Rose, a delicate silver brooch from Kirby. As they sat before the fireplace in Rose's apartment that Christmas evening, Kirby took her hand. "I have something else for you," he said, suddenly looking nervous. "Something I've been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, a modest but beautiful sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Rose Zachary, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Rose looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, the man who had patiently waited for her to heal, who had never pushed, never demanded. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Kirby Powell." His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "I promise to cherish you every day we have together. And I promise not to let fear stop me from loving you completely," Rose replied. They were married in the Clearwater Church on a bright February day in 1878, with the entire community in attendance. Rose wore a dress of deep blue velvet rather than traditional white, acknowledging her status as a widow but celebrating the new beginning. Kirby's brothers traveled from Montana and Idaho to stand with him, while Martha served as Rose's attendant. After the ceremony, the town threw a celebration at the hotel dining room. As Kirby led Rose in their first dance as husband and wife, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible a year earlier. "Happy?" Kirby asked softly. "More than I dreamed I could be again," she answered truthfully. Rose maintained ownership of the store but hired Martha as manager, allowing Rose to divide her time between town and the ranch. They settled into a rhythm, with Rose spending part of each week at the store and the rest at the Triple P. The transition to ranch life had its challenges. Rose had to learn to cook on a much larger scale to feed the ranch hands, navigate the complexities of cattle management, and adjust to the isolation of ranch living. But Kirby was patient, the Cowboys respectful, and the ranch house became increasingly a home with Rose's touches. Spring brought new calves, fresh greenery, and news that transformed their lives. Rose was expecting a child. The announcement was met with joy throughout the community, but no one was more ecstatic than Kirby. "A baby," he whispered in wonder, his hand gentle on Rose's still flat stomach. "Our baby." For the first time since they'd met, fear shadowed Kirby's eyes rather than Rose's. She understood immediately after losing his first wife and child in childbirth, this news would bring back painful memories. "We'll be fine," she assured him, covering his hand with hers. "Doctor Bennett is excellent and I'm healthy." As Rose's pregnancy progressed, Kirby became increasingly protective, insisting she spend more time at the ranch and less at the store. By her 7th month, in October of 1878, Rose had temporarily handed full management of the store to Martha, promising to return after the baby's birth. The pregnancy was uneventful until early November, when Rose went into labor a month earlier than expected. Kirby rode frantically for the doctor, fear evident in every line of his body as he galloped away. The labor was long and difficult. By the time Dr. Bennett arrived, Rose was exhausted and complications had developed. For 16 agonizing hours, Kirby paced outside the bedroom, listening to Rose's cries and the doctor's murmured instructions to the midwife. Finally, as dawn broke, a baby's wail pierced the air. Minutes later, Dr. Bennett emerged, looking tired but satisfied. "You have a son, Mr. Powell," he announced. "Small but strong," and Rose, resting. "It was a difficult birth, but she came through it. She's a fighter, your wife." Kirby entered the bedroom on shaky legs. Rose lay pale against the pillows, but her eyes were open, and she smiled weakly as he approached. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," she whispered. Kirby sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring in wonder at the small, red face. The baby's eyes were tightly closed, his miniature fingers curled into fists. "He's perfect," Kirby said, his voice choked with emotion. "You're both perfect. We thought we might name him John Kirby Powell," Rose said softly, "to honor the past while embracing our future." Tears filled Kirby's eyes as he nodded. "It's a fine name for a fine boy." Little John thrived despite his early arrival. He grew quickly, a happy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. Rose recovered her strength gradually, helped by Martha's continued management of the store and a young local girl hired to help with household duties at the ranch. By spring, Rose was able to resume her schedule of dividing time between the store and ranch. John accompanied her everywhere, adored by the cowboys and fussed over by the town's women. On John's first birthday, as family and friends gathered at the ranch to celebrate, Rose slipped away to find Kirby standing alone on the porch, watching the sunset. "Everything all right?" she asked, sliding her arm through his. "Just thinking," he replied, drawing her close. "A year ago today, I nearly lost you both." "But you didn't," Rose reminded him. "We're here and we're strong." "You know what amazes me most," Kirby said, turning to face her. "How fear can blind us to possibilities. If I'd let fear rule after Sarah died, I'd never have opened my heart to you. And if I'd let fear win after John died, I'd never have known this happiness," Rose agreed. "It took courage for both of us." "Worth every terrifying moment," Kirby said, kissing her softly. "Every single one," Rose affirmed. As they returned to the celebration, Rose reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the devastating loss that had nearly broken her, through grief and healing, to finding love again with a man who understood that the heart expands to hold new love without diminishing what came before. The years that followed brought more children: a daughter, Sarah Rose, born in 1880, and another son, William, in 1883. The Triple P Ranch prospered under Kirby's management, expanding to become one of the largest operations in the region. Zachary's mercantile grew as well, with Rose eventually opening a second location in Laramie. In the winter of 1889, as they celebrated Christmas with their children and extended family, Rose found Kirby once again on the porch, looking at the star-filled sky. "13 years since we met," she said, joining him. "Best thunderstorm of my life," Kirby chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your horse hadn't gone lame that night?" Rose asked. "Providence," Kirby said firmly. "Some things are meant to be, even if the path getting there is difficult." Inside, their children's laughter mingled with that of Kirby's brothers' families, who had come to visit for the holidays. The house was full of warmth and joy, a stark contrast to the lonely, grief-filled existence Rose had known before Kirby entered her life. "Thank you," she said suddenly, looking up at her husband's still handsome face, now lined with the experiences of their years together. "For what?" For giving me the time I needed, for waiting until I was ready. Kirby's eyes, still the same vivid blue that had first captured her attention, softened with love. I would have waited forever for you, Rose. I'm glad you didn't have to, she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the Wyoming sky, brilliant and fleeting, a reminder that life's most precious moments, like love rediscovered after loss, should be cherished for their rarity and beauty. As they returned to the warmth of their home and family, Rose silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought a rain-soaked stranger to her door on the eve of her departure from Montezuma. In seeking escape from her grief, she had instead found the courage to embrace life again, to risk loving despite fear, and to build a future far richer than she could have imagined. And Kirby, watching his wife's face in the glow of the Christmas tree, silently blessed the storm that had forced him to seek shelter at the home of a grieving widow. His patience in waiting for her heart to heal had been rewarded 1,000-fold in the life they had built together, a testament to the power of love that grows stronger for having overcome the fear of loss. In the years that followed, as their children grew and the new century approached, Rose and Kirby Powell became pillars of the Clearwater community. Their story of loss, courage, and love reclaimed became something of a local legend, offering hope to others facing life's hardest challenges. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, Rose looked at Kirby and saw not just the strong, capable rancher who had won her heart, but also the cumulative memories of their shared life, the births of their children, the expansion of their businesses, the challenges they'd faced together, and the quiet moments of connection that had sustained them through it all. "Still happy with your decision?" Kirby asked quietly, his hand finding hers as it had countless times over the years. "Taking that leap of faith," Rose smiled, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of a life fully lived. "It was the best decision I ever made." The fear of loving again had once seemed insurmountable. But Rose had discovered that a heart that knows great loss can also know great joy, sometimes even greater, for understanding the preciousness of love. And Kirby had shown her that patience and steadfast devotion could bridge the gap between grief and hope, between fear and love. Their story, which began with a chance encounter on a stormy night, continued to unfold in the lives of their children and grandchildren, a legacy of courage and love that would endure long after they were gone. For they had learned life's most valuable lesson, that only by risking the pain of loss can we experience the full measure of love.